All right, we're off and running on the Krueger Show. Hope everybody's having a great day. It is August the 9th, 2024, 10:50 West Coast time, 1:50 East Coast time. Chase Sr. in the house from Chat Sports. We're going to talk a little Niners right here. This is our normal spot, 10:45 on Fridays, but we've been off a little bit on the schedule because the Niners have training camp, but the Niners are off today in training camp. So perfect time to bring you a Krueger Show brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera, and they're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Get some brisket chili. Go say hi to Damon and Mary and tell them that Larry Krueger sent you. And we have a brand new sponsor. You can see right above Chase's head there, Mancini's Sleep World is now a proud sponsor of the Krueger Show. That's right. We'll talk about it more in a bit, but I have a brand new Mancini's bed, and my wife and I are loving it tremendously. We'll tell you about how you can support the show and how you can save courtesy of the Krueger Show by just using the code KRUG10 at sleepworld.com, and you get 10% off your total purchase of a Mancini's mattress. And why not support the show and go buy yourself a brand new Mancini's mattress and sleep fantastically. We'll talk more about that in a bit. All right, Chase Sr. in the house. Chase, there's this Brandon Aiyuk thing that just doesn't seem like it ever wants to go away. You got agents apologizing to content creators. We've got people backpedaling, dogs and cats sleeping together. What are we ever going to get this thing done? Is this thing ever going to reach a conclusion? And now I'm starting to wonder, does Aiyuk even want to be traded? Does he want out? Does he not want out? Now his wide receiver coach says he wants to stay. He's holding in. A lot of people think it's personal and that Shanahan's done with Aiyuk and that he won't bring him back and is not open to bringing him back despite the fact that he said exactly the opposite. Make some sense of this. What's the latest in your mind on Aiyuk?
What a wild ride this has been, Larry, because I remember we were talking about this time and time again in April in the lead up to the NFL draft. And I was saying on the 49ers report, if there's a time to trade away Brandon Aiyuk, it makes sense in the lead up to the draft. Therefore, you get some draft compensation back and or players, and those pieces will allow you to better prepare for the upcoming 2024 season. And at that point, Niner fans were saying, Chase, I'm so tired of the Brandon Aiyuk conversation. Can we talk about something else? And that was 5 months ago. And here we are, August 9th on this Friday, and we're still talking about the Brandon Aiyuk situation. Now, what's very interesting is that when you think back to some of the previous contract extensions that the Niners have signed their homegrown players to, George Kittle was not signed until August 14th of 2020. But that had a lot less dialogue and a lot less controversy, and it was less tense than this Brandon Aiyuk situation. And I know a few weeks ago, we kind of posed the question, which was a more dramatic offseason, Deebo Samuel or Brandon Aiyuk? Because Deebo unfollowed the Niners on Instagram. He wiped his Instagram of all things Niners related. But at the time, I thought, yeah, Deebo's offseason was more hectic than this. Nothing beats this offseason from Brandon Aiyuk. I have coworkers here at Chat Sports who cover the NFL and other teams, and they're saying to me, can the Niners just figure out what's going on with Brandon Aiyuk, sign him or trade him? I'm tired of hearing about it, and we have to talk about this every single day because it continues to be a paramount conversation and one of the biggest storylines in the entire National Football League. And then today, in this course of daily updates, we have his wide receiver coach, TJ Houshmandzadeh, saying other teams are offering Brandon Aiyuk $32 million per year. Aiyuk is willing to play for way less to stay with the San Francisco 49ers at $28 million per year. So fans are outraged and saying Aiyuk should take less to stay home with the Niners. He's willing to take less, but the Niners are not moving off that $26 million per year number. And then you have Herm Edwards, who coached Aiyuk at Arizona State,
right?
Coached John Lynch in the NFL, brought Ricky Pearsall to Arizona State, saying there's no doubt that Aiyuk wants to stay with the Niners. And I believe that because he doesn't want to go to Cleveland. He doesn't want to go to New England. I think the two teams that he'd be open to playing for are Pittsburgh and Washington, but they haven't upped their offer to the Niners' liking. And if the Niners are going to be so stubborn about the $26 million per year number, and they're going to be so stubborn about what they're willing to pay Aiyuk, I think this is on the Niners here. They have to be willing to move off that $26 million per year price tag, go up $2 million on an average annual value. And before you say, Chase, these contracts are nuanced and there's guaranteed money at play, I get that. But the salary cap is going to continue to increase. We might add an 18th game, and $2 million per year in the grand scheme of things is not all that much when you think about bringing back a 26-year-old second-team All-Pro who's literally gotten better and has had better production every year that he's been in the NFL. So I hope there's a resolution soon. I think there needs to be a resolution soon because the Niners need to figure out what their receiving core is going to look like, how their offense is going to maneuver this upcoming season, because week one is not far away, and week one, the opponent, no slouch. New York Jets are going to have one of the best defenses in the NFL.
No question. No question. And the Niners are better with Aiyuk. The question I would have for you is that, does it seem to you, Chase, that, I don't know, I mean, it's like, I almost feel like this is not about the net difference between what the Niners have offered and what Aiyuk's asking for. It feels to me like it has gotten personal. Like I'm sick of him. I'm sick of Aiyuk. And I'm talking about Shanahan. I'm sick of Aiyuk. I'm sick of this hold-in. I don't respect the hold-in. Schlereth ripped the hold-in, said Aiyuk was soft. Schlereth is a buddy of the Shanahans.
Yep.
Do you think Schlereth is going to call him soft if he doesn't think that the Shanahans agree with him? Probably not. So, there's that. And when Kyle's been asked, hey, how do you differentiate a holdout versus a hold in? Kyle's just like, I don't know. He wants no part of it, but you can kind of tell it's like there's something. I don't know if it was Aiyuk saying that Jaden Daniels could take his game to the next level and all the song and dance about I'd love to be a commander and you're playing in this offense. I don't know if maybe Shanahan got rubbed wrong, but I just think that my read on it, at least, is that Aiyuk said and did all offseason what he felt like he needed to do to try to further his cause. Did it work or not? It hasn't worked thus far. But I get the sense that Aiyuk, despite all the things he said, despite the flirtations with the Commanders, but despite he texting, Tomlin and all the different things that he's done to try to, rattle the cage and create, waves, I think at the end of the day, he's still cool with coming back. I think Shanahan's the one who's not cool with having him back. I think Shanahan's done with him, even though Shanahan's about to march this guy out of town, despite the fact that to do so would probably hurt the 49ers Super Bowl chances. And Shanahan seems so stubborn, like he doesn't care either way. It's like, you know what? I'm marching this guy out of town anyway. That's my read on it. What am I too close to this? Am I seeing this right? I mean, I like Kyle Shanahan. I like John Lynch, but I get the feeling that Shanahan's the emotional one and Lynch is like the true adult, like grounded one. And that Lynch has his hands full just trying to keep Shanahan, off the reservation and away from the ledge. I don't know. I just get the sense that Shanahan is close to Aiyuk coming back.
That serves as a perfect segue to what I want to get to next, because you throw out a word, stubborn and stubbornness. I think stubbornness is part of the reason why the San Francisco 49ers have come up short and they haven't won a Super Bowl yet, because Kyle Shanahan has been a very stubborn head coach in some really tense moments in games. He's been willing to adapt and adjust and change the way that he does things offensively from a pass protection standpoint, a schematic standpoint in the passing game, and just overall as being a head coach in the NFL. He is stuck in his ways. He's very proud of what he does. He comes from a family tree that's obviously really impressive with his father, Mike Shanahan, winning those Super Bowls with the Denver Broncos. Mike Shanahan back in the day was also very stubborn, and that's why it took him a long time to win those Super Bowls with John Elway on some of those really talented teams. And that's why he really came up short as a head coach before finally breaking through. And I think we're kind of seeing that ring true for Kyle Shanahan here. And that has been a common complaint among fans who understand that Kyle Shanahan has a really great offensive mind. The Niners would not be in the situation that they're in right now and have been without Kyle Shanahan leading this team. To go on this run of 4 NFC title games and 2 Super Bowl appearances in 5 years is a great run that any team in the National Football League would take. But Kyle Shanahan is a very stubborn guy. And I imagine he thinks back to that 2019 team that had the number 1 seed in the NFC. And he's saying, hold on. Everybody's trying to tell me that I can't win without Brandon Aiyuk because he's a great all-around wide receiver and a great deep threat. I took Jimmy Garoppolo to a Super Bowl, and at the time, my number 1 wide receiver was a player who we traded for at the deadline in Emmanuel Sanders, and we were led by my schematic running game and a really good defense. Don't tell me that I can't get back to the Super Bowl without Brandon Aiyuk, because I can find ways to scheme things up. I can find ways to come up with play designs that will allow our offense to be successful. Look at what I've done and the numbers that my offense has put up with Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy, as this team's starting quarterback. I can win without Brandon Aiyuk. And Kyle Shanahan is kind of old school in a way where, look, I think that Aiyuk has miscalculated some of the things that he's done this offseason. I think at times his approach to this has been a little bit petty and a little bit awkward. I don't think Aiyuk is the guy who wants to ruffle feathers. I don't think that Aiyuk is the guy who wants to take to social media and TikTok to try to leverage his situation and getting paid. But he's also looking at how these other wide receivers have gone about it. And he's saying, I probably have to do the same thing. And Kyle Shanahan's probably looking at this saying, look, if you showed up, if you didn't take to social media with all of these antics, we'd find a way to get a deal done. Look at what we've done with George Kittle, Fred Warner, Deebo Samuel, Nick Bosa. We'll find a way. Just don't cause unnecessary distractions for our football team. But that's the modern era with how things are. And while Kyle Shanahan is very tight with a lot of his players, he probably doesn't agree with the approach. So I do think that Kyle Shanahan and his stubbornness is kind of standing in the way of the deal getting done. And then you have to add on top of all of this that Parag is a very stiff negotiator, and Jed York might be looking at this offense saying, do we really want to give $28 million per year to a wide receiver when since the Christian McCaffrey trade, we've thrown the ball at the 32nd rate in the NFL? He probably has some hesitations. Parag negotiates one way and one way only. It's his way or the highway. And then Kyle Shanahan is stubborn. And all of this combined is why we're sitting here going into the second week of August, and Brandon Aiyuk is still without a deal, and there's no resolution.
I'm gonna share the screen here. I'm gonna show you this quote, the 33rd team. Now, this is on the Trey Lance thing from long ago. This is from Akash put this out on Twitter in August of 2023. But here it is. Here's Joe Banner with Ari Myrov, and he's talking on the 33rd team.
Trey Lance start on Sunday.
And you're going to hear Joe Banner, and he's talking about Lance here, but just forget that context. Just listen to what Banner says about Shanahan. And Banner worked with Kyle Shanahan. I think this is really interesting. Watch this little exchange.
Then there is the quarterback situation in San Francisco. And we all saw Trey Lance start on Sunday in the preseason game. And if you just looked at the box score, you probably thought, wow, he had such a good game. But if you watched it, you saw that his touchdown pass should have probably been an interception. You saw that he was sacked 4 times. It was not really a great game for Trey Lance. Joe, Trey has been in these trade chatter all off season long. Brock Purdy is ahead of schedule. They signed Sam Darnold in free agency. Do you feel like Trey's future is in San Francisco? How should they handle all of this here with the regular season approaching in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, so my answer is affected by a lot by the fact that I worked with Kyle Shanahan, and he's obviously a really good coach. I worked with some really good offensive coordinators. He is as smart, if not smarter than any of them. But he's a very emotional guy, and he tends to be a fairly short-term thinker. And once you get in his doghouse, it's really hard to get out. But knowing the way Kyle is wired, it's really hard for me to picture how they could ever just get back into really good, positive place supporting each other. So that leaves me with kind of a simplistic that if they could find another place and give trade.
So there you go. That's basically the long and the short of it that I wanted to play there. It's just that he's a short-term thinker. He's an emotional guy, and when he kind of makes his decision, he locks in. And I think
keep in mind that Joe Banner was Andy Reid's right-hand man with the Eagles in the early 2000s when they went on that run of 4 straight NFC championship games, and he understands how Andy Reid operates and how Kyle Shanahan operates. And Joe Banner was known to be a very stiff negotiator as well, leading the front office for Philadelphia.
Yeah, so I mean, it just sounds to me like Shanahan is kind of pushed out of shape by Aiyuk, and even though Aiyuk is doing everything in his power to maybe come back to the 49ers or get this thing resolved, it seems like Shanahan is more interested in moving on. I'm not saying the 49ers don't have severe cap problems because of the impending contract that will be handed out to Purdy next year, but they can do any individual move they want to do. And it sounds to me like this has become, like they had their plan and they wanted to replace this guy and they tried to replace him in the draft. And they, I don't know. The whole thing is just so confounding from the standpoint of why didn't they trade him in April when there were so many seemingly more opportunities? Obviously, they must not have gotten their price. What do you make of the Diana Rossini story, which is that the Niners don't like what the Steelers are offering? The Niners now are in a position where I guess they feel like because Pearsall and Cowing are hurt, they need to get a receiver back, and they don't like either the receivers the Steelers have or the receivers the Steelers are offering them. And there's a lot of speculation that they were going to try to take some picks from Pittsburgh and float those picks to a third team for a receiver. I mean, now we're getting into unprecedented 3-way August trades involving players that never happened. So it's like, I don't even know what to say about this. You know what I mean? It's like we're projecting things that like literally never happened in the history of the league. So I don't know what kind of solid ground. What do you make of the Rossini report? And do you think that that's the next chapter here, that the Niners get, I don't know, James Daniels and Dan Moore and a pick for Aiyuk and then trade that pick to Cincy for Higgins or Denver for Sutton, or who knows? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know what to make of all of this reporting because you have Adam Schefter saying the Niners are in no rush to make a deal. They're going to be patient about this because they want to make sure that if they trade away a second-team All-Pro, they want to get some really good value back. That's a report that I can lean on because that's how good businesses operate. You can't just trade away a second-team All-Pro who's 26 years old, whose numbers have exploded alongside Brock Purdy for 75 cents on the dollar, which is why if you were to make this trade, you should have done it in the lead up to the NFL draft, because right now it's going to be really hard to get equal value for a player like Aiyuk. And then you have Mike Silver, I believe, who reported that Kyle Shanahan didn't like that Aiyuk gave him a bro hug. I don't really believe that because it looked to me like Kyle Shanahan dapped up Aiyuk and kind of went in for the bro hug himself. I do believe our assessment that Kyle Shanahan's stubbornness might be in the way of making a deal or getting a deal done. And then you have Diana Rossini saying that the Niners don't really like the asking price, but that's the reality of the situation because here we are a few weeks into training camp and teams are trying to figure out what their offensive and defensive personnel is going to be on both sides of the football. And if an acquiring team brings in Brandon Aiyuk, you have to get him acclimated. If the Niners bring in some offensive linemen like a Dan Moore, they have to get those offensive linemen acclimated because Kyle Shanahan's scheme is very complex, especially for offensive linemen, given all of the pool blocking that they have to do and just the overall scheme difficulties. And then as part of this, I'm thinking, well, if the Niners want a wide receiver back and Pittsburgh is the destination, is Calvin Austin going to move the needle? I don't think so. To me, I think the Niners are in a good spot in that wide receiver room, even if they lose Aiyuk, but their offense still isn't going to be as good. And then the latter part of this, are the Niners trying to get some picks back and then kind of pull off an NBA-like trade in which you referenced, which we really don't see often, in which you bring in a third team where the Niners get let's say a second and third round pick back for Brandon Aiyuk, and then they flip that second and third and maybe another future pick, and they send that to the Las Vegas Raiders for Devontae Adams, who is very affordable this year and has a non-guaranteed contract following this year, in which you could restructure that for an older player who right now might be better than Brandon Aiyuk, but in the future there's risk because he's 31 years old and he's unhappy with his situation with the Raiders. Could he be a target? Could T. Higgins, who's looking for a long-term deal with the Cincinnati Bengals, be a target as well? But then I think, well, hold on. If you want a player like T. Higgins, he's unhappy with Cincinnati because he's looking for a new deal. So you trade away Aiyuk because you don't want to pay him, but then you bring in T. Higgins and you're going to have to pay him to make this trade worth it. Some people have asked me, why don't you bring in George Pickens? Same situation. You bring in George Pickens, you're going to have to pay him a year or two down the road because he's going to be looking for a new deal. Now, will Higgins or Pickens be as expensive as Aiyuk's $28 million asking price? Maybe not. But the wide receiver market is going to continue to increase. It's going to continue to explode because it's a very important position. But as the NFL salary cap inevitably continues to go up, player contracts will continue to go up, which also involves this part of the conversation. $28 million per year for Brandon Aiyuk a couple of years down the road actually might look like a good contract if he can stay healthy, he can continue to produce, because the wide receiver market will continue to be on the uptick. And I know that the Niners next year are like $35 million over the cap, but they have the most cap space in the NFL right now, like $55 million. And there are ways to massage the cap and pull off salary cap gymnastics. And that's why I'm so perplexed. Get this deal done. Just go up a little bit from that $26 million per year number. It's so telling what TJ Houshmandzadeh, who's Aiyuk's wide receiver coach, is saying. He's saying Aiyuk wants to take less to play with the Niners. He just wants 28 instead of the 32 that other teams are offering, but the Niners won't move off that $26 million per year number. It's just the overall stubbornness of this organization that's really head-scratching. And for me, fans have the right to be completely outraged by the situation because you cannot blow this Super Bowl window that you have right now. And if you blow the Super Bowl window, the Niners and this stretch, this era, are going to go down as one of the biggest what ifs in the history of the NFL.
Oh, so they're putting themselves in that Buffalo Bills category if they can't get it done in this with this current regime, let's just say with Lynch and Shanahan. It does make you think when you're seeing all the hoops that they're jumping through. They drafted Cowing. They drafted Pearsall. They're looking now to get a receiver back from Aiyuk, in the Aiyuk trade, or get back a pick that they could then engage a third team and get a receiver. It's almost like we need a receiver, but we don't want Aiyuk. You know what I mean?
Yep.
We have an all-pro receiver that we drafted. We saw, Niner fans saw Kyle Shanahan show rare emotion when on draft night, the year they drafted Aiyuk, where he was sitting there with his family. He was super excited to have Aiyuk. And now something's wrong with the relationship, and now you don't want Aiyuk. Now it's like, okay, you're going to move Aiyuk in a trade, but now you got to get a receiver back to replace him. And maybe that receiver will be another high-priced receiver. So is it that you don't want to pay a high-priced receiver, or is it you just don't want to pay your high-priced receiver, Brandon Aiyuk? And then the question is there, Niner fans are like, hey, get Devontae Adams. But Devontae Adams is 32. Cortland Sutton is younger, but he doesn't really separate. And Shanahan loves separation. T. Higgins is intriguing, but, the Bengals – when they say they're not going to make a trade, they just don't make a trade. The Bengals are like the last team that probably makes a trade. The one guy that to me is interesting is I was reading that Minnesota may trade Jordan Addison because of his issues off the field. Would you try to engage Minnesota and get a young guy like Addison? Now he's had some DUIs. He's had some problems off the field, but man, he's a hell of a receiver. That's for damn sure. I don't know. Kendrick Bourne does not move the needle for me. Amari Cooper was not going to be an exciting acquisition. Now, if you can flip picks for Sutton or Adams or Higgins or Addison, somebody like that. Now I'm intrigued. DeAndre Hopkins, something like that. But I don't know. I'm not intrigued by Kendrick Bourne, and I was not intrigued by Amari Cooper. Did either of those names excite you? And is there a receiver out there that you think, you could see the Niners somehow taking some picks from Pittsburgh and spinning him to a third team for that receiver?
See, that's the issue. It's like you could get 75 cents on the dollar for Brandon Aiyuk, and you talk about these other wide receiver targets. Kendrick Bourne is not even close to being a number one like Aiyuk is, and he's coming off a torn ACL. A player like Jordan Addison as a rookie, 108 targets, 70 catches, 911 yards, and 10 touchdowns. He had really good production. He's entering his age 22 season, but he can't stop driving fast in cars, as he's had multiple instances in which he's gotten in trouble doing that. And if we're going to talk about Kyle Shanahan being rubbed the wrong way with Aiyuk's antics, Jordan Addison would probably piss him off as well. A player like Amari Cooper is older, but he's been highly productive. He's sneakily on a Hall of Fame track. He's had 7 1,000-yard seasons in 9 years, so he's been a highly productive player. He likes to go up and down, but is he going to be a guy who is a fan of running dig routes? Is he going to block in Kyle Shanahan's offense? He hasn't really shown a willingness to do that. That'll rub Kyle Shanahan the wrong way. So if I look at wide receiver targets for Aiyuk, George Pickens would be great. Steelers aren't trading him away. The whole point of them trading for Aiyuk is to pair Aiyuk up with George Pickens. Devontae Adams is 31 years old, about to turn 32. He hasn't declined as far as production. That would be a short-term move to maximize your Super Bowl window right now. But is there a huge gap between Devontae Adams and Brandon Aiyuk? No. So why don't you just pay Brandon Aiyuk, who's 5 years younger than Devontae Adams? If you want to flip Aiyuk for another wide receiver, T. Higgins, that would be of interest to me because he's young. He's really good. He has very good size. But again, this all comes back to why don't the Niners just retain Aiyuk, who's everything that they envision him becoming? When they took him 25th overall in the 2020 draft out of Arizona State, they, in a dream scenario, saw him becoming an all-pro. He just became an all-pro. When you think about this Niners team and the characteristics of it and the identity of this football team, they are tough, rugged, physical. They want players who love ball, who have dedication. They want players as part of their player development program who work hard, get better, and progress. Aiyuk's been able to do all of that. How many wide receivers are going to be willing blockers downfield like Aiyuk is? How many wide receivers in the league have the footwork and the route running and the separation skills and ability to pick up yards after the catch like Aiyuk? How many wide receivers are goal line to goal line threats where when you get inside the red zone and in between the 20s, you're still a big time playmaker, unlike a Tyreek Hill, who's very limited because of his lack of size? Aiyuk is a great scheme fit. He's respected by his coaches and his teammates. He's earned this bag that he's looking for. He's willing to take less. He's done everything that you've asked of him. As a team, you've won a lot. You've put time into him developing, and he's become an excellent player. And now the difference is $2 million average annual value and a few $1,000,000 in guaranteed money. And I think to how other teams operate, right? A team like the Philadelphia Eagles, they get ahead of this stuff. They don't let these contract situations linger. They sign their players earlier in the offseason to get ahead of the market. The Niners could have done that with Aiyuk. They could have had him at $25, $26 million per year. But because they operate with these contracts, we've always done it this way, so why change? Now we're in a situation where Aiyuk's become more expensive because the market has exploded. Yet Philadelphia and Howie Roseman, a team who you're competing with and against in the NFC, they have Devontae Smith at $25 million per year. The Detroit Lions acted quickly in signing Amon-Ra St. Brown. They have him at about $28 million per year. But because you waited, it's now cost you, and now you run the risk of losing Aiyuk to another team.
The Pittsburgh, let's talk about Pittsburgh for a second. The Niners, Drake Jackson, PUP, done for the year. Knee injury. He might not have a career.
Yep.
Robert Beal is, Drake was supposed to be DN number 4, and Beal was supposed to be DN number 5. And Beal is raw as the first day he walked through the door, and Jackson's done for the year. So when you're looking now at this Aiyuk deal with Pittsburgh, do you have to get Nick Herbig? Do you have to get Alex Highsmith? Do you have to get an edge rusher? Or then do you look at Trent Williams and his holdout and say, you know what, we're talking about Aiyuk, but there's a chance Trent Williams has held out and gone the whole year in the past. I mean, he's held out of full seasons before. He may not come back. He may ride off in the distance. I mean, the Niners, we might be talking about Aiyuk, but they got replacement wide receivers. They got no replacement tackles. So do you sit there and look at that Aiyuk trade to Pittsburgh and say, you know what, forget these other guys, forget a wide receiver. We need Dan Moore and James Daniels because we need a couple offensive linemen that the Steelers have, or we need a pass rusher. Do you look at those two spots now because of the way camp has gone to this point?
Those players that you mentioned, and then you think about maybe having a need now at defensive end because Drake Jackson's going to be out for the year, and you look at a player like Nick Herbig, who is certainly intriguing, but last year as a rookie, he played in 17 games and he had 3 sacks. You're going to have to get, a second and maybe another pick and or an offensive lineman to make the trade worth it. You think about a player like Alex Highsmith. This is a player who last year had 7 sacks. The year before that, 14.5. The year before that, 6 and 2. Is that a player who can drop back into coverage a little bit? As Nick Bosa said that he's kind of willing to do that. Is that edge rusher that helps you out a little bit? I think the Niners kind of knew that Drake Jackson might miss this year. That's why they signed Leonard Floyd, brought in Yetur Gross-Matos. But you're now relying on Robert Beal to take a big leap because you're a little bit thin at edge rusher. And that's where Highsmith, Herbig, and some picks might be the players that you look at in addition to one of those offensive linemen to try to get a deal done. But I still don't think that's equal value for a player like Brandon Aiyuk. And now in the grand scheme of things, with Drake Jackson going down, the Niners roster getting a little bit more expensive, they're already in a price crunch. When you have draft classes like the 2022 draft class, that's a draft class that can set you back. Drake Jackson in the second round, Ty Davis Price after that, Danny Gray, Spencer Burford, Samuel Womack, Nick Zakelj, Kalia Davis, Tariq Castro Fields, and Brock Purdy. You might come away from that draft class having one player who made an impact for your organization, and that's Brock Purdy. So that puts more pressure on the Niners, in my opinion, to try to get this deal right where you get some really good value, because if you flop this trade, you're in a precarious situation moving forward.
If you could handpick your deal for Aiyuk, what would you do? I mean, you've already stated that you'd rather see him resigned, and I think most Niner fans feel that way. But let's just say that it is personal and he's moving on. You can make a deal. What deal do you want to make? Do you want to make it with Pittsburgh? And if so, what do you want coming back? I mean, what do you think's the best deal that Lynch can pull out of this?
Well, all off season, we've said Brandon Aiyuk doesn't have any leverage. The Niners have the leverage because Brandon Aiyuk is under contract on the 5th-year option, $14.1 million, and you can franchise tag Aiyuk the next 2 years. While that's true, if you do want to trade him away, the leverage kind of flips to Aiyuk, because an acquiring team has to know that if we give the San Francisco 49ers a hefty package for Brandon Aiyuk, we have to know that he's going to sign a contract extension with us. Well, we know he didn't want to sign one with the New England Patriots. He doesn't want to go to the Cleveland Browns. And right now it looks like there could be 2 teams where Aiyuk is willing to go. That's the Pittsburgh Steelers and it's the Washington Commanders. And do you have hesitations in sending him to Washington? Because if this deal doesn't work out for you, you have egg on your face. Your former assistant general manager is going to take a victory lap around your organization, and you send him to another upstart team in the NFC. You send him to the AFC, a team like Pittsburgh, then that situation probably makes you a little bit less uneasy. My perfect Aiyuk deal, I don't really like anything that Pittsburgh has to offer. I don't think their offensive linemen make your offensive line that much better. Calvin Austin doesn't move the needle for me at all as far as a wide receiver replacement. So I think you have to factor in a very rare type of NBA trade in which you try to involve a third team to get a wide receiver or a high impact player back. And if it's a wide receiver, let's say Pittsburgh gives you a second and a third. According to reports, Pittsburgh was offering the Niners a first-round pick in the lead up to the draft. So you're already settling for lesser value there. So now you get those draft picks back. Do you flip them for Devontae Adams? Do you flip them for a player like T. Higgins? That's the type of trade that I think would end up being a decent move for San Francisco, where trading away Aiyuk doesn't force you to take a monster step back offensively. And I worry about the stubbornness of Kyle Shanahan here. He might say, I'm done with Aiyuk. Whatever we can get back, I'll find a way to make it work. And I know that Kyle Shanahan is a great offensive mind, but you can't convince me that trading away Aiyuk makes you better, or Kyle Shanahan can find a way to make it work, because we finally saw what this offense looked like last year with the deep threat. Aiyuk gave the Niners that, and if you lose that, this offense is different. You will be defended different. We saw what Kansas City did in the Super Bowl. They flustered San Francisco with their ability to play press man. Well, now without Brandon Aiyuk, they're going to play press man. They're going to load the box, and that's going to make the wide receiver's job more difficult. That's going to make the running game less effective because they're going to crowd the box for Christian McCaffrey. It's going to make Brock Purdy's job a little bit more difficult, thus making your offense less explosive and less dynamic than it was last year when you had the number one overall offense in the NFL.
Is Aeneas Smith going to make Philly? Or is he
might not. He's struggled with dropping punts, and he's not in the rotation to be the wide receiver 3. In fact, Johnny Wilson has been getting first-team snaps as a 6th-round pick. He's 6'6", jump ball guy who can go up and get it. He's been the more impressive rookie so far.
Interesting. A couple new names. Give me your thoughts. I'll just say, I'll throw you the name, and I'll just throw. We'll play this game. We'll call it either something or nothing.
Okay.
This signing is closer to something or closer to nothing. The Niners have signed former Green Bay Packer defensive end Jonathan Garvin, who recently won a UFL championship with the Birmingham Stallions. He was drafted in 2020 out of the U, played in 38 games, ran a really, really slow time in the draft that year, like 4.8. But he was a productive defensive end at the UFL level. He recorded 3.5 sacks, added a couple more in the playoffs, which led the league. Drake Jackson, former 2nd-round pick, was placed on injured reserve on Thursday. His season's done. What do you think? Jonathan Garvin, something or nothing?
I would say nothing. I know that some people get excited about players with the UFL who pop off, and the Niners had to make a move at defensive end because of the injury status with Drake Jackson, but I just don't see him being a high-impact NFL player.
Okay, how about this one? The Niners signed Robbie Chosen. If you said, who's Robbie Chosen? He was Robbie Anderson, and he's a tall, skinny, 190-pound receiver who ran in the 4.3s coming out of college. He's been on about 5 teams at this point. Robbie Chosen, something or nothing?
So if you trade away Brandon Aiyuk, I actually think this could be something. Robbie Chosen is a player who has actually produced, and he's had good years at the NFL level, unlike some of these other recent signings that the Niners have had. Robbie Chosen Anderson is a player who has 379 catches for more than 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. Back in 2020, he had more than 1,000 yards for the Carolina Panthers, 136 targets, 95 catches, 1,096 yards, and 3 touchdowns throughout his career. He's been hurt by bad quarterback play. He played with the New York Jets when they were awful, Carolina Panthers when they didn't have good quarterback play. And then the last couple of years, he's hopped around between Carolina, Arizona, and Miami. I have familiarity with Robbie Anderson when I was at Temple University and Matt Rule was there. That's when I was at Temple covering the team on a daily basis. And this is a player who has had to deal with some adversity in his life and in his NFL career. At Temple, Matt Rule sent him packing because of some character issues. And then they brought him back to the program, and he was a part of the revitalization of Temple University's football program. He played really well with P.J. Walker as the starter. P.J. Walker was the Browns' backup quarterback when they handed the Niners an L last year. And Robbie Anderson has gotten it done at the NFL level. He's tall, he's skinny. He's a vertical threat, though. And if the Niners trade away Brandon Aiyuk, you need that vertical threat. And Robbie Anderson at his pro day at Temple, he was not an NFL Combine invite. He actually ran a 4.2, and then also in the pre-draft process, as you noted, he ran a 4.3. So he's fast. He's gotten it done. He's had really high-level production at times at the NFL level, and I actually think that could be something if the Niners trade away Aiyuk, but they're so deep at wide receiver that it's kind of hard to tell.
Yeah, I mean, you got a bunch of guys that are in the mix there at wide receiver. The Niners also signed Jontre Kirkland, who's 6 feet, 185-pound wide receiver from LSU. I don't know if you know anything about Kirkland. He actually looks pretty quick on the field. He only ran 4.52 for the stopwatch, so he's not a burner per se, but he looks pretty athletic. Any thoughts on Jontre Kirkland? The other guy that was signed this week was safety Tracy Walker, and Walker's interesting because he's a safety that's got some real coverage ability. And that makes him a viable, opportunity, a viable option for a roster spot.
Yeah, I would say Kirkland is nothing. I would say Tracy Walker is something. You and I have talked about kind of the lack of depth at the safety position for San Francisco just because of the injury to Talanoa Hufanga. George Odom has had a really good training camp. Back on Wednesday, he intercepted Brock Purdy twice. I think he could have the inside track of maybe starting alongside Jair Brown. Odom, Jair Brown, I think those are your starting safeties week 1. Jair Brown is one of my favorite breakout candidates this year. Malik Mustafa had a little bit of an injury scare this week, and then he returned to practice on Thursday. I like the player. I think he's an excellent athlete with really good range and positional versatility, but you're still a little bit light as far as depth at safety. Now, Tracy Walker was a former third-round pick several years ago out of LSU.
Yeah.
Never really reached expectations with the Detroit Lions, but he has started more than 40 games in his NFL career. He's played in 79 of them. There have been stretches of solid play. Last year in coverage, he did give up a passer rating of like 123 plus. Not great, but this is a safety-friendly scheme for San Francisco. And you think back to a couple of years ago when Jimmy Ward was dealing with a couple of those injuries in the lead up to the season. What did the Niners do? They signed Deshaun Gibson to the practice squad. They didn't even sign him to the active roster. He gets elevated to the active roster. He plays so well to start the year when everybody thought that he was washed coming off that stint with Chicago. And he surprised a lot of people with being elevated, then playing well. Then he played so well that the 49ers were like, we can't keep this guy off the field. We need to move Jimmy Ward to slot nickel. And the last 2 years, Deshaun Gibson played very good football. So Tracy Walker is a player who, in a safety-friendly scheme like the Niners have, in which they get creative with how they can use their safeties, I could see the Niners maximizing a player who's a former third-round pick, a little bit of pedigree, a lot of experience, and is only 29 years old.
Niners also signed former Steelers punter Presley Harvin the third. And this is interesting because Mitch Wishnowsky, the Niners punter, who's a hell of a punter, he's been dealing with some knee irritation, maybe even some tendonitis in that knee. And so the Niners need a reliable punter. The Steelers drafted Harvin in the 7th round out of G-Tech in 2021. 3 NFL seasons. He averaged 43.7 per punt, 39.4 net yards per punt, 34.6% of his punts landing inside the 20. According to Pro Football Reference, and the Steelers cut him February the 12th, right after the Super Bowl. What do you think? Is Presley Harvin just a camp body, or do you think there's some significant concern about Wishnowsky?
This is obviously all dependent on Wishnowsky's injury. I think anytime you have a punter who's dealing with tendonitis, that's not great. Mitch Wishnowsky is coming off a year in which statistically and eye test wise, he was one of the best punters in the NFL last year. Special teams are very important. And Wishnowsky was really good. I thought he was excellent in the Super Bowl too, with Chris Conley on the receiving end of a couple of down punts that were critical moments in that Super Bowl. I think that this is actually something, and I'm actually kind of high on the player. I know Pittsburgh released him, but I think that he could actually be a decent option if Wishnowsky and this injury continues, and we're going to see a look at him as early as Saturday against the Tennessee Titans because he's the only punter who is actually healthy enough to go in preseason game number 1.
How serious is the Trent Williams holdout? I mean, do you think that the Niners need to start preparing contingency plans? I mean, they really don't have one. I mean, Jalen Moore is their backup left tackle. Colton McKivitz is their starter at right tackle. They played the rookie Jarrett Kingston out of USC. They played him a little bit at tackle. They have Brandon Parker in camp, but I mean, I wouldn't say Brandon Parker is anything. They've got Isaac Alarcon. He's their international player. They have Sebastian Gutierrez, Chris Hubbard. I mean, they definitely seem like they're pretty naked at tackle. How do you think the Trent Williams thing is going to play itself out?
This is a concern for me if they can't get a deal done and if Trent Williams isn't on this team, just because this offensive line is already questionable. I'm not sure about Jake Brendel at center. There's a battle right now for right guard. I think Colton McKivitz is better as a backup tackle and swing tackle in this league, but he's going to be your starter, and we saw him give up 47 pressures last year. It's also the blind side of Brock Purdy. If you're without Trent Williams, it is highly problematic for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations, especially when you consider the drop-off from Trent Williams, one of the best left tackles of all time, to Jalen Moore, who in recent practices has made some strides, started to play a little bit better, but come on now. He's just not the beast and the special player that Trent Williams is, who's a perennial All-Pro and Pro Bowler, who is highly impactful in the pass game as well as the run game. And the Niners are clearly just a different offense and team when Trent Williams is on the field and healthy as compared to when he's off the field hurt, or in this case, he's holding out. The other thing about Trent Williams, of course, there's some risk with him being 36 years old. The offensive tackle market, like the wide receiver market, has exploded. So now he's the 5th highest paid offensive tackle in football. And he's looking at these other players saying, they don't have the chops that I have. They don't have the pedigree that I have or the resume that I put forward. I should get a new deal. I think it's going to be very similar to the Christian McCaffrey contract, where they give him an extension as well as some guaranteed money, because he, like McCaffrey, had no more guaranteed money left on his deal. And if you do that, there's a way actually for the Niners to save like $15+ million over the next 3+ years. And I think that's a no-brainer move. I also think about Trent Williams' age. He's 36 years old. And when I put out a video tweet the other day, I had like a former player, I think, quote tweet it and say, a lot of people don't realize that Trent Williams is trying to preserve his body a little bit. So I don't know if this is a panic-like situation, but at some point you have to get this offensive unit at full strength getting ready for week 1. This New York Jets defense is really damn good. And if you don't have your number 1 wideout or your starting left tackle and you're trying to throw things together in the lead up to the game, and the Niners lose that game week 1, this fan base is going to riot, because the Niners could have avoided all of this.
Oh, what if Brock Purdy takes some significant hit because,
Josh Dobbs, Brandon Allen, no thanks.
Yeah, I mean, that could be really, really ugly. Yeah, the Trent Williams thing, it's like we're talking about, Aiyuk, Aiyuk matters, but I mean, Trent Williams is the best player on the team, and he's holding out, and he's held out full seasons in the past. What do you expect to see in 2 days? Niners Titans get the preseason rolling in Nashville Saturday at 4:00 West Coast. We'll have it. I'll be on the by the way, I'm now on KMBR 680. I'll be on the KMBR 680 pregame show, which this week, because the Giants are still going on the baseball side, will be on 8:10 a.m. So catch me 2 p.m. on Saturday with John Lund, Dennis Brown, and Adam Copeland. I think Dennis maybe won't be there because I think he's not doing road games. So it'll be John and Adam and myself. Check me out 2:00 on 8:10 a.m. Saturday for pregame, and we'll also join those guys for a little postgame as well. But what do you think? What do you expect? What do you want to see? What are you looking forward to seeing Saturday?
Well, first of all, congratulations in store for you for getting that gig with KNBR as the return is official. I know we talked behind the scenes about, some things developing for you on that front. I'm excited for you, and that's awesome because people in the Bay Area are going to be winners with you being on the air full time. And I was a radio nut growing up, so I absolutely love the industry, and I'm glad that you're back. As far as what I'm looking forward to, I don't think the Niners are going to reveal anything. They're banged up. I don't expect starters to play, especially for a team that played deep into the year, playing in the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, I really want to see Ricky Pearsall in game action, but because of that shoulder injury, not sure we're going to see him in game action. So what I want to look out for, what's the offensive line rotation? How does Dominic Pooney look? How does Malik Mustafa look? What do we see from Robert Beal? What do we see from Ronnie Bell? Because he might be relied upon. I want to see what the new kickoff looks like, because obviously that's an added wrinkle. D. Winters and Jalen Graham. I am very excited to see them in action, because I think they're going to get an extended look. And I think that D. Winters has an opportunity to maybe unseat Devondre Campbell as one of this team's starting linebackers potentially. And then the backup quarterback situation is really hairy. If Brock Purdy were to go down, I just don't have a lot of confidence long-term in Brandon Allen or Josh Dobbs. And of note, the Niners released their first depth chart this week going into preseason game number 1, and they don't have a bona fide backup quarterback set. They have both Brandon Allen and Josh Dobbs listed as QB2. So that is an ongoing battle. And then elsewhere, I'm very excited to see a player like Cody Schrader get extended looks, because I think this dude was just made to be a football player. I hope that we get an extended look at Jordan Mason. And with that, I want to see him continue to run with physicality, run with power. But he said, I invested in a jugs machine. I was looking at Christian McCaffrey and I said, if he's doing that, I got to get better at catching the football. I want to see Kyle Shanahan call passing plays for Jordan Mason. And of course, all these rookies and young players, I think it's going to be important to see them. The cornerback spot is very deep as far as depth. What does Isaac Yiadom look like if he can play because he's been injured? Rock Ya-Sin, Samuel Womack's on the roster bubble, Darrell Luter Jr. on the roster bubble, Jair Brown, will he play? He's going into a big year too. I think that he can be a breakout candidate. So I'm looking at kind of all of those areas and more going into this preseason game.
I'm looking for the runners and the linebackers. To me, I'm looking for, what does Cody Schrader look like? A little bit even on the back end, like Breida and Keyshawn Vaughn. Eager to see what those guys look like, but definitely Cody Schrader, because Schrader has looked really good in practice, and there's been a lot of players from Juice to Kittle to others who have had good things to say about Cody. And
backup tight end is another position, right?
Yeah, I mean, Mason Pline has looked fantastic in this camp. And I expect Pline to make this team. I know that's crazy because he's an undrafted free agent, but the rest of that group outside of Kittle doesn't look all that special. And then I'm looking for the linebackers, Jalen Graham, D. Winters, even Tatum Bethune, Curtis Robinson. To me, the last 3 or 4 days, the thing that has really stood out is that the Niners' depth at linebacker between Graham, Winters, Bethune, Ezekiel Turner, Curtis Robinson, those guys can all play. Curtis Robinson really looks good. I mean, he is absolutely flying all over the place.
Fowles as well.
Flanagan Fowles, another guy. These guys, their depth at linebacker is really impressive. And then I would say the other thing that stands out about the Niners is that this secondary is just absolutely primed for a big year. There's the entire secondary is in the prime of their career. And, you got good depth now, both at safety and at corner. I like the addition of Tracy Walker. I think that helps a little bit. But Mustafa's been amazing. Renardo Green has been amazing. These two guys look really, really good. So I'm eager to see the young DBs, the young linebackers, the young running backs, and maybe even a little bit of Shaquille Brown and Evan Anderson, the two behemoth interior defensive tackles. I'd like to see what those guys do. All right.
What can we expect from Tanner Mordecai? I do want to ask you about
I expect Tanner Mordecai okay, so I asked Brian Greasy about Tanner Mordecai. I said, is there any chance that Mordecai beats these guys out? And he's like, we're trying to win a Super Bowl. In other words, we're not gambling on some undrafted rookie free agent quarterback as our number one backup to Brock Purdy in a year where we're trying to win the Super Bowl. But guess what? And I know that when the games start, what happens on the field takes precedent. Yeah. And if Tanner Mordecai is more successful at moving the 49ers offense up and down the field in the preseason, Tanner Mordecai will back up Brock Purdy, not Allen, not Dobbs. So I hear what he's saying, and I understand what he's saying. But when I asked Brock the other day about Mordecai, and he gave me this kind of Cheshire cat grin and was like, "Man, Tanner can rip it." And you could kind of tell And I'm out here watching these practices. Tanner Mordecai looks very, very similar to what Brock Purdy looked like 2 years ago. As far as he masters every drill, he's mediocre size, mediocre arm strength, but you just kind of look at every drill and you're like, hey, the ball came out on time and hit the guy right between the numbers. He had a couple overthrows this week, but he probably has the best arm strength of any of the Niner quarterbacks. And the guy runs 4.45 and is, Luke Fickell told Brian Griese, this guy's a leader. This guy broke his hand in 5 weeks later, played in the bowl game against LSU and threw for 378 and 3 touchdowns and no picks. So yeah. I'll say it right now. I mean, I'll put what I see, my eyes over Dobbs and Allen's resume. I think Mordecai looks better than Dobbs, better than Allen, and I think he's going to beat them out. I'm really
excited to see what he can do. And
yeah,
I hope that Kyle calls from like RPO runs for him to see what type of athleticism and dynamic running ability he might be able to bring to this offense too.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about 4.45 speed. That's really something. One more on the Eagles. I know I ask you some Eagle questions and people start pushing back on you. I go, why is this Eagle talk? Chase covers the Eagles as well. So, what's their quarterback situation behind Jalen? I know they brought in Kenny Pickett. I'm a big, big fan of Tanner McKee. I love Tanner McKee. He's a big 6'6" kid who throws rockets and is really smart and is underrated. He's now had some time to learn that offense. How is any word on McKee versus Pickett versus Greer? How's that shaking out in Philly?
Yeah, Will Greer's definitely not going to make the team. He's barely getting any reps. I actually think Tanner McKee can upset Kenny Pickett to be the team's backup quarterback behind Jalen Hurts. Tanner McKee played in a dog shit offense at Stanford under David Shaw. And it's really hard to evaluate a quarterback when he's playing in such a vanilla, lackluster, mundane scheme. In the preseason last year, Tanner McKee has good size, a really good arm, and he was able to throw with touch, timing, and accuracy out to the sideline, out to the boundary, out to the numbers. And I'm very impressed with him. And I think he has underrated mobility. For Kenny Pickett, he's smaller, small hands, weaker arm, career 13 touchdowns to 13 picks. I know that he was kind of playing in a bad offensive system with an offensive coordinator who shouldn't be an OC in this league in Matt Canada before he was let go. So it's hard to gauge him. But Tanner McKee, I think, has had a better training camp than Kenny Pickett. And I think that he could be QB2 behind Jalen Hurts week 1 against the Packers in Brazil.
Am I seeing gear? Am I seeing Niner gear or garb there? What do we got there? 49er Report?
49ers Report polo.
Does that say your name on there?
No, by Chat Sports.
Oh, Chat Sports. Okay.
Yeah. 49ers Report by Chat Sports.
Dude, that's a good looking polo. All right, let's hit some supers and we'll roll to the door. Tons of people here, almost 3,000 people in the chat today, or 3,000 people watching this thing. Ricky Williams says, BA to the Colts and get Buckner back. Call it good. Yeah.
That'd be wild.
You do kind of wonder about the Colts sometimes because Chris Ballard, it seems like he's always looming. He's always looming. Yeah. You saw it on Hard Knocks with the New York Giants. Yeah, hey, Joe, how you doing? Chris Ballard here from the Colts. And Joe's like, you know what? I think I'm going to stay. I don't think I'm going to trade. Jarak Chimaru says, BA, make an apology to Purdy and Debo for what you said. Well, I don't know if he needs to apologize. He's just touting his boy Daniels. Ricky Williams says T. Higgins is better and younger than BA. Pay him. I'd be happy. I'd be happy with targets. Yeah, I'd be happy with a player and a draft capital that you could flip to Cincy for T. Higgins. I could be very happy with T. Higgins. Middleman Exotic Snacks says just pay the $2 million. He's the healthiest of the $28 million receivers. Why are they so cheap? Pay Demo now too before we do this all over again in 2025. All right, I'll throw it to you this way. If we got to this point, Chase, where it was literally you can sign Aiyuk, but not sign Banks, Ward, or Lenore, or sign Banks, Ward, Lenore, but not sign Aiyuk. What do you want?
Man, I think you
'Cause
can let Banks
that might
walk.
be the call.
Yeah, that might be the call. I think you can let Banks walk, though, and then you can go with Dominic Pooney at left guard.
Yeah.
And that's kind
You
of
got a
your
lot of young corners.
plan ahead for the future. Diamador Lenore, though, that's a big loss. I mean, this is a corner who's given up 4 touchdowns in coverage in 3 years. He can play outside, inside. He plays with this ferocious competitiveness that I absolutely love. He's been durable. He's an ascending homegrown player. I think if the Niners signed him now, they could actually get ahead of the market and get him at a pretty good rate.
Yeah. DeAndre Swift said, and he can deliver a big hit in a big game and send guys into night-night.
Yeah.
You remember that hit. Niner fans remember that one well. John Muniz says, 5th-year option. Why trade him for pennies on the dollar when we don't have to? You both were saying that option in the beginning of this drama. Yeah, but you know what? It seems like, once again, that we went from a situation when Chase laid it out earlier perfectly. We went from a situation where the Niners had him on the 5th-year option and they held all the cards. And as this thing has played out, it just really hasn't played out that way. And you kind of wonder now, who really has the leverage in this situation. For the Snowflakes, it says Niners either be the Yankees or not, but we can't be halfway. Buy a Super Bowl. Kyle and Upper Brass need to eat this and sign BA. Okay. Rafael Flores, Niners are dumb enough to trade BA and sign Juju Smith-Schuster, who got cut today. And one non-super from Alexander Boy Entertainment. He says BA and Mitchell to the Pats for Judon and Milton. Did you see the rocket pass that Milton completed in the preseason game last night? Dude, is Joe Milton? Are we going to have a Milton May Boston radio who's the better quarterback debate for the next 3 years?
Yeah, like that conversation has started to take off because Colin Cowherd on his podcast was saying Joe Milton could beat out Drake May. Here's the thing about Milton. He's great size.
Amazing athlete.
He has maybe the best arm in the NFL. I'm not even kidding as far as arm
threw
strength.
Threw it 92 yards at the Tennessee spring game, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he can straight up launch it with the rocket launcher. Here's the thing. He'll make a throw like that, and then he can't hit the broadside of a barn. So that's the issue. But if he can iron out those inconsistencies with his lack of accuracy, he's a freak.
No doubt. Hey, that's going to do it. What do you got cooking the rest of the day, man? First of all, I'm glad to have you back. And it's been a couple of weeks. Yep. We've had training camp, and we'll get into a regular rhythm once camp ends. But I know you guys over at Chat Sports. I've been watching your stuff. You guys are blowing up. Tell people what you got cooking either the rest of today or coming up here in the next few days.
Yeah, so I did a reaction to the Niners' first depth chart. I put that video out on the Niners Report a little bit earlier. Of course, we'll continue to do Brandon Aiyuk updates. Tomorrow, though, I am doing a watch party for Niners Titans. And our watch parties, I think, are the most exciting place for fans to experience game day outside of being at the game. So we'll go live an hour before kickoff for a pregame show. So be on the lookout.
Shotgunning beers? Will there be any Chase Senior shotgunning?
So I'm on this... I'll shotgun here and there and maybe do a beer boot. We'll do some super chat giveaways and whatnot, but I'm in like really good shape because I've been on this crazy fitness regimen. So I don't want to do as much drinking this year as in years past, but we'll see how it goes. To be determined. Exactly. At this point, we don't know. Chase, good stuff, man. Thanks to all of you guys. Thanks to our sponsors. Actually, we never did our Mancini's. We need to do our Mancini's, and we've yet to do our Mancini's ad read. So we should call up Mancini's. What am I doing? See, this is what happens when you get a brand new sponsor. You're not quite as locked in as normal. Here we go. We got that Mancini's, but wait, Chase. There's this Mancini's. That's right. Mancini Sleep Portal is a proud sponsor of the Krueger Show. Mancini's offers a 120-night guarantee with a range of brands and price points. We just got our mattress. We're loving it. All you got to do is go to Mancini's or use the code KRUG10 at sleepworld.com, and you can get 10% off your mattress. Mancini's offers a 120-night guarantee with a range of brands and price points. With Mancini's, you get free
next day delivery. Click the link below or go to sleepworld.com. Find a bed that works for you, whether shopping online or visiting in store. All you got to do is use the code KRUG10 and you get 10% off your mattress and your purchase. KRUG10, either at checkout or in store. That's KRUEG 10 to get 10% off in store or online at sleepworld.com. All right, Chase, good stuff, man. Have a great rest of your Friday. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Good to see you, bro. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you